I am aware of the time, so we're just going to jump right in, if everybody's okay with that. I'm going to start in 1 Samuel chapter 6, and if you've got your Bibles and you want to turn there, I'm going to take this just a few moments here to thank Pastor for allowing me again to come up here. I also want to wish my wife a happy sweet 16th birthday. And for those of you who don't know what that means, you should have been there. First Samuel chapter 6, starting in verse 7, says, "Now then, get a new cart ready with 2 cows that have calved and have never been yoked. Hitch the cows to a cart, but take their calves away and pin them up. Take the ark of the Lord and put it on the cart. In the chest beside it, put the gold objects you are sending back to him as a guilt offering. Send it on its way." Verse 9, "But keep watching it. If it goes to its own territory toward Beth Shemesh, then the Lord has brought this great disaster on us." You can be seated. I'm so thankful because the Lord has confirmed his word. Everybody that spoke before me here tonight were just tiptoeing all over this message, and it was, Pastor, you hit on it this morning. Brother Jerry, you hit on it in Sunday school this morning. We talked about it in the prayer room. It was just, God is so good to just confirm his word. I'm going to back up a little bit and give you a little bit of history on what's going on in that text that we read there. Israel has just come into the promised land, and they're just starting to settle in the promised land. For those of you who don't know this story, Israel comes out of Egypt. They come into the promised land, and they are supposed to drive everybody out. They don't do that, and it's going to cause them a lot of trouble for the rest of, even until today, they're still having trouble getting people out of the land that God promised to them. And so one of those groups were the Philistines. Translated into modern English, Palestine, Palestinians. Those of you who know anything about the Middle East right now, it's Israel and the Palestinians. They're still fighting this battle. If you back up to 1 Samuel chapter 4, and Sister Judy, I didn't give you any of this, so don't worry about it. You back up into the 4th chapter of 1 Samuel, it tells the story of how Israel went to battle against the Philistines, and they lost this particular battle. They lost about 4,000 men. I think it says 4,000 men were killed. So they retreated. They went back to their camp. They should have, I'll say this, they should have asked the Lord, what happened? Why did you not help us? Instead, they asked themselves, why was the Lord against us? So they come up with this idea, and I don't know where they got this idea, but they said, well, we need to guarantee that God's going to be with us this time. So they go and they say, oh, hey, let's go get the Ark of the Covenant and bring it to the battle, and that'll guarantee God's going to be with us, because that's where God, at that time, that's where God dwelled among his people, was he came down, and the seat that sat on top of the Ark of the Covenant was the mercy seat. That's where God manifested his presence to the children of Israel. So they said, let's get the Ark of the Covenant, take it to battle, God will be with us, and we'll win. That did not happen. They got the Ark of the Covenant, they went into battle again, and they lost, but this time they lost big time. They lost about 10,000 men that time, but even more important than that, they lost the Ark of the Covenant. They lost the most important thing that they had as a nation, and that was the presence of God. They lost the mercy seat of God. Trey, you want to help me? Trey said he wanted to help me. He said he wanted to preach a little bit, so I'm going to let him. I'm just kidding. This is Trey. Y'all know Trey. Say hi, Trey.
Huh?
Trey likes to play golf. You like to play golf, right? Trey didn't tell me this story. In fact, I'm making most of this story up. Trey went to play golf one day, and he met some people that he had never played golf with before, and they said, "Hey, Trey, you want to play golf?" He said, "Sure, let's play golf." And they beat him. They embarrassed him a little bit. They beat him pretty bad. So Trey goes back home, and he thinks, man, I got to go back in a couple of weeks, and those same guys are going to be there, and they're going to want to play golf again. I need something to help me beat them. So Trey gets an idea. He says, I know, my dad's a pretty good golfer. I'm going to use my dad's golf clubs. So Trey goes and doesn't ask his dad, but he goes and he picks up his dad's golf clubs. And he goes back, and sure enough, he sees those same guys, and they say, "Hey, let's play golf. Oh, you got a new set of golf clubs. Let's make it interesting. Let's play a round of golf, but whoever wins gets to keep the other guy's golf clubs." Well, Trey don't want to back down. He's already committed to this, so he says, "Yeah, okay." But Trey thinks he's going to win because he's got his dad's golf clubs, but he doesn't. He loses. How much trouble would you be in, by the way? Especially if Brother Jerry didn't know about this. So now not only is Trey embarrassed twice over, but now he's lost something very important to him. Thank you, Trey. That's what happened to the children of Israel. They didn't ask God, "Hey, God, can you help us out here? What do we need to do?" You know, previously in Israel's history, they lost battles, and they went to God, and they said, "God, what happened?" And God told them, "There's sin in the camp. You need to deal with it, and then when you go back, I'll help you." They didn't do that this time. They just said, "Okay, well, let's get the Ark of the Covenant, and we'll kind of force God into doing what we want him to do." And that don't work. That never works, by the way. And so for the next 7 months, the Ark of the Covenant is in Philistine hands. Chapter 5 of 1 Samuel tells the story of how the Philistines are dealing with the Ark of the Covenant. They've got that Ark over there, and they've put it into one of their temples for one of their gods, Dagon. And if you know the story, it's really interesting because they set the Ark of the Covenant in Dagon's temple, and the next morning they go in, and Dagon's on his face bowing down before God. Pretty, you know, I would think, you know, if somebody knocked a statue over in the middle of the night, it probably thought it was some kids or whatever, but then they set their idol back up, and then the next day they come back, and not only is the statue of Dagon face down on the floor in front of the ark, but now his head's chopped off, his arms are cut off, he's completely shattered. Then I think they got the hint. Because then they moved the Ark of the Covenant. They said, well, we're not going to keep it here. We're going to move the Ark of the Covenant. So they sent it to another Philistine city. And that city, people start getting tumors, start getting cancer, for lack of a better way of explaining it. They start getting these tumors. But on top of that, some rats just infest the land of the Philistines. It's just, the rats are in everything. I told you last time last time I preached about wolves, and somebody told me just don't talk about spiders. Well, I'm going to talk about rats a little bit. No, I'm kidding. But these rats and tumors, these plagues, just hit the Philistine people hard. And so the second time they moved it, they said, well, we're not going to keep it here. We're going to move it to another Philistine city. And that third Philistine city said, no, you're not. You ain't bringing it over here. And so they gathered the Philistine rulers together, and that's where we are in this text. They asked the wise men of the Philistines to say, how are we going to get rid of this thing? What are we going to do we don't want to deal with this anymore. It's been 7 months and all this stuff's happened. We're done with this. I don't want it, I don't want it. Do you want it? No, I don't want it. Do you want it? No, let's give it back. And so that's where we are in 1 Samuel chapter 6. Verse 10 of Samuel 6 says, the men did this. They took 2 cows, They took 2 such cows and hitched them to the cart and pinned up their calves. Hold that verse up there for just a few minutes. We're going to camp out here for a minute. So they did this. They took 2 such cows. And this is where we're going to spend a little bit of time here, because I'm here to tell everybody that we are cows. Look at your neighbor and say, I'm a cow. Now look at your other neighbor on the other side and say, you're a cow. And don't have too much fun with that. But what we need to understand is we are these cows, and if you'll bear with me for just a minute, they took 2 such cows. Nothing in God's word is there for just any reason. Everything's there for a reason, and it says they took 2 such cows. Why not just 1, Brother Paul? Keep in mind now, we're cows. Brother Jonathan, can you come help me? It says they got 2 cows, and they hitched them to a cart together. Or cows, okay? I'm just going to go ahead and confess, Brother Jonathan.
Can I be a bull?
You can be a bull.
Thank you.
Just this once. I'm going to go ahead and confess. I don't agree with everything you have to say all the time. I don't agree with everything you do all the time. But we're in this together.
Right.
We've been hitched up to do something. And what do you think about what those 2 cows are doing? They're carrying something. What are they carrying? They are carrying the glory of God.
Right.
Brother Jonathan, I don't care how much we disagree or if we don't see eye to eye on everything, but you and I got a job to do.
Right.
And we got to do it together.
Amen.
And it doesn't matter how much we disagree or how much we don't see eye to eye. We've got a job to do because we are carrying the glory of God. It's not about me and my plan and my agenda and my time frame and what they said it earlier. When your pastor has a vision, you don't measure that vision. And so you have 2 cows. You got to have unity. Sister Amanda, you said it. That's been a theme. That's been a reoccurring theme. Pastor, you've preached on it. We've had lessons on it. We've got to have unity. We've got to get together on this. The second thing in that verse there is it says they pinned up their calves. Now, I know there's a few people here tonight that raise cattle. My dad is one of them. I'm glad my family's here tonight. My dad has raised cattle pretty much as long as I can remember. Not my whole life, but as long as I was old enough to remember. We've had cows growing up around my house. And so I talked to my dad, and those of you who know anything about livestock can probably back this up, but I asked my dad, I said, what would happen just for whatever reason you had to take a mama cow and separate her from her calf? What would you expect? Long story short, don't get in her way, because whatever's between her and that baby is getting destroyed. You're going to tear up fences, you're going to tear up gates, you're going to tear up pens, you might get hurt if you get in the way. But it says they took the calves and they pinned them up. So right off the bat, you think, okay, we've hitched these cows that aren't supposed to be hitched up to a cart. Sister Whittington, we may have to do things that we weren't called to do because we've been given a task of carrying the glory of God. They shouldn't have been, those 2 cows are milk cows. They shouldn't be pulling a cart. They've got calves. They shouldn't be pulling a cart. They should be raising those calves. We might have to do something that's uncomfortable. I'll dare say that you may have to give up something that's precious to you, that you want to take care of, that you want to do. Like I said, it's not about our agenda. It's not about our plan. It's not about what we have. Sister Amanda Maddox, you were talking about your kingdom. It's not about my kingdom. It's about the kingdom. I'm going to prove this in the New Testament. I told someone, I said, they like to, I love the Old Testament because it shows us so much about how we need to do and what we need to learn. There's a lot of lessons in the Old Testament. But I told someone who only ever preaches out of the New Testament, I'm not going to name any names, but he only ever preaches out of the New Testament. And I told him, I said, you need to preach out of the Old Testament. He said, no, we're in the New Testament. We're going to stay in the New Testament. I said, okay, we'll agree to disagree. But 2 Corinthians chapter 4, starting in verse 7. But we have this treasure in jars of clay. That's the flesh. To show that it is this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us. It's His. It's not ours. Verse number 8. We are hard-pressed on every side. See if you can relate to any of this. We are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed. Perplexed, but not in despair. Persecuted, but not abandoned. Struck down, but not destroyed. We always carry around in our body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be revealed in our body. If you can imagine carrying that cart, you're doing something that you don't want to do. You're burdened with something that you didn't ask for, Brother Jonathan. How to put this in words? Go ahead and skip down to verse 16 of that same chapter. It says, therefore we do not lose heart. Another translation says, therefore we do not give up. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles, that list in those previous chapters, or those previous verses, didn't sound light and momentary. Those sounded pretty tough. But Paul says, for our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory. What did I say? What are we carrying? We're carrying the glory of God. That far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but what is unseen, since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. What's on our cart far outweighs the burden that's on our shoulders. What we're carrying is more important than how I don't really feel like going to church tonight, or I don't really, I know that needs to be done, but I'm not the person to do it. I'll do it if nobody else wants to do it, but I really don't want to. We've got to understand this is bigger than us. This is way more important than just how we feel and how we want to do things. Those cows in 1 Samuel, and I've lost my place, y'all forgive me. Verse 12 of 1 Samuel chapter 6. The cows went straight up toward Beth Shemesh, keeping on the road, lowing all the way. I'll steer clear of that one. They did not turn to the right or to the left. Proverbs chapter 4, verse 25. Let your eyes look straight ahead. Fix your gaze directly before you. Give careful thought to the paths for your feet, and be steadfast in all your ways. Do not turn to the right or the left. Keep your foot from evil. I thought about that. I said, I read this in 1 Samuel. I read this and I thought, I've heard that before. Don't look right, don't look left. Brother Benny, 23 other times in the Bible it says, don't look right, don't look left. And every one of them, I didn't have time to go through every one of them, but every one of them is the same message. You can't get distracted from your goal. You've got to keep looking straight ahead. If you look to the right, it may be okay, but it's still going to distract you. You may look to the left, and that's really going to mess you up, because that's not where we need to go. Right or wrong, you still got to look straight ahead. Don't look right, don't look left. And just like Proverbs said, keep your feet from evil. And I'm almost done. But there's a reason for all of this. There's a reason, and this is where it just really hit home for me, because I've been dealing with this. I told somebody that, I've been stuck on 1 Samuel for a while now. I've been stuck there because every time I want to read something else, I'm reminded of what's going on in 1 Samuel, and I'm thinking, okay, go back, and it just wouldn't leave me alone. I was like, okay, I've got to share this. I've got to get this out. But this is where it really hits home. 1 Samuel chapter 6, verse 12, and I've already read it, but I'm going to read it again. The cows went straight up the road. Sorry, I'm in a different translation down here. Then the cows went straight up toward Beth Shemesh, keeping on the road, lowing all the way. They did not turn to the right or to the left. Is that it? The rulers of the Philistines followed them as far as the border of Beth Shemesh. Remember back in verse 9. Verse 9 said, but keep watching it. I've said all that I've said, and I hope that you understand that we do have a job to do. We do have something that we're carrying that's bigger than us. But there's another reason that we got to keep doing all this, and we got to do it the right way. That's because there are others watching us. It's not just about us. I've proved that. It's not just, and this, don't take this the wrong way, but it's not just about the kingdom. It's about those that are outside the kingdom that are watching, that are keeping an eye on us. Verse 16 says, the 5 rulers of the Philistines saw all this and then returned the same day to Ekron. These are the gold tumors the Philistines sent as a guilt offering to the Lord, each one of them for Ashdod, Gaza, Ashkelon, Gath, and Ekron. Those are 5 cities. We don't know the names of those rulers, but we know the names of the 5 cities that they represented. There was 5, I don't know how I didn't do enough research, and I apologize, but I didn't look in to see how their political system worked. But I do know that there were 5 major cities with 5 major rulers, governors, mayors, if you will, but they were rulers. And the names of those cities are Ashdod, Gaza, Ashkelon, Gath, and Ekron. And I did not realize how important this was until I looked at what those names mean. Anytime I'm reading the Bible, I always want to look and see what does that name mean. If you look and you're reading about Abraham, if you're reading a particular story about somebody in the Bible, go back and look up what their name means. Just Google it. It'll open up so much more to you than just reading someone's name. If you understand what their names mean, it's going to open so much more up. So when I went and I started looking at these names of these cities, I thought, man, that's where it's at. We know all 5 of those people, whether you know it or not. If you have any kind of life at all, if you interact with anybody ever, you've met at least one, if not all 5 of these people. And I'm just going to quickly go through the list, and then I'm going to get out of the way. But Ashdod, this one was tough. I couldn't find really a clear definition of what Ashdod means, but I finally found it. It's inclination. Someone with an inclination. Have you ever heard somebody say, well, I'm just predisposed to this or that? They've already got their mind set on something. Their mind is trained a certain way, and that's where they're going to be. That's who they are, and you're not going to change it. They are inclined already. That's an inclination. That's Ashdod. They're going to do things their way, and you're not going to convince them otherwise. But I guarantee you, someone who is set in their ways, they are still watching you. Why? Because you are carrying something that is more powerful than they are, and they know it. Gaza is a strong city. How many people know anybody with a strong personality? I've met some strong people. I work with some strong people. I work with a guy, he's about 7 foot 18 inches, just massive guy, just huge. And he's a weightlifter, he's a bodybuilder. He is, and this guy, you do not, we call him our complaint department, but he is a strong person. And I've dealt with people like that they're strong. They don't need anything. I'm tough, you know. And even when you see things in life bothering them, they don't want to show you that it's bothering them because they're strong, Brother Terry. They don't want to let down and let you see that they're weak in any way at all because that's their personality. They're strong. And that's what Gaza is. Gaza is a strong person. But Gaza is watching you. There again, same reason that Ashkelon or Ashdod is watching you, because you're carrying something that's more powerful than you, and they know it. Ashkelon means to weigh out, to be logical. Everything has to make sense. You have to convince me that it's going to be, that I've met people that say, well, I can't believe in God because it doesn't add up. Well, it's not going to add up because you have to have faith first to please him. And if it made sense, then everybody would do it. And so you have another, there's another personality. Ashkelon is to be logical. Everything's got to make sense. But they're watching. Gath. This is where Goliath came from. And I was surprised by this because I would think Gath meant strong city because of Goliath. I would have thought Gath meant, strong personality, strong person, but it's not. Gath means wine press. It's already been said. But I came in contact with Gath just yesterday. Someone who is looking to a substance or a bottle. You've heard the expression, looking in the bottom of the bottle to fix the answer to your problem. Gath is someone who they don't know what they're going to do. They're not that strong personality. They wish they were, because then they could at least look like they were strong. But Gath is a wine press. Gath is someone who is dependent on something. They're probably the easiest one to reach because they're looking for something to help them. And then the last one is Ekron. Ekron means torn away. Barrenness. And this one just breaks my heart. And we all know this person. Brother Terry, we were talking about it just before service. Ekron is torn away. Ekron has been here once before. And Ekron now is lost and backslidden. And to me, that's the worst of all five. Because they know better, Pastor. They've heard it all before. And they don't think that there's anything they can do about it. They're lost they don't know what to do. But guess what? Those of us that are still under that cart, that are still under that yoke, and are still doing what we need to do, walk in the straight line, Ekron's watching you. Ekron will watch you until the day you die. And I'm not. I told you I was going to close. I'm going to wrap it up. But I said earlier that those cows, they had their calves taken away. They lost something precious. What the rest of the story is, you go to the end of that chapter and it talks about those two cows Brother Jerry, they were sacrificed on an altar. They tore the children of Israel, when the ark came back into the land, the children of Israel tore the cart apart. They built an altar. They killed the cows. They sacrificed the cows. Those cows never went back home. And everyone that was watching them turned around and went. It says there in 1 Samuel, it says that those 5 Philistine rulers, they turned around and they went back home. But they had gone back home knowing that what God was trying to tell them was true. Every one of these people, Ashdod, Gath, Ashkelon, Gaza, and Ekron, they watched. The backslider watched until the very end. The wino watched all the way up until the very end. The strong man watched all the way up until the very end. And those cows were sacrificed. You may lose your life. You may carry the glory of God all the way until the end of your life and never see any of those 5 people join you. You may go to your grave and never see the promise. You may never see what God is going to do in those 5 people's lives. But you got to keep going. And don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I'm going to close with that and just say, I'm just going to invite everybody to come, and I'm going to open the altars. If you feel led to come up, we'll wait for me to finish talking. But if you're carrying a load that's too much for you to bear, I would encourage you to pray for strength. God, help me to keep going no matter what, because there's people watching me. There's others that are looking at what I'm doing. My life is a living testimony for someone. And if that's you, then by all means come. And if by some chance you're one of those 5 people, then these altars are open to you too. Don't assume that you have no hope. Because they watched until the very end, knowing that what they wanted to know about God was true. And if you're watching somebody to see if what this is true, then I'm just going to go ahead and tell you it's true. Sister Whittington, if you will. This is not well polished or well put together, but it's still true. Church, we're being watched. We're being followed. They're looking to us for answers, and we've got to keep doing what we know is right.